I'd like to welcome you to this videocast of chair instructions for the ESOT Congress in Glasgow. I'm Forsythe Jardine, I'm co-chair of the Congress, and with me is
John Forsythe, the other co-chair, and just to add my welcome, to say thank you very much, first of all, for agreeing to be a chair of the Congress, and secondly, to say that chairs are always important, but even more so in this conference. We've tried to, as we've said in the strapline for the meeting, it's a meeting with a difference. We wanted to point out to you what some of those differences would be and why a chair is even more important in some of the sessions and the types of presentation.
If we move on to the programme, there are four things that we've tried to change in the Congress design. The first is that we've introduced clinical cases as a focus for discussing clinical conundra. We have introduced controversies rather than debates. And we've broken up the posters so that there are classical posters, but many of the things that would have been presented as posters in the past are presented either as mini-orals or rapid orals. And another thing that's different in this Congress is that the venue for presentations is not in classical lecture theatres, but is in a mini auditoria within the exhibition area, with the idea of promoting interaction between the sponsors and the delegates. It's a 4-day Congress, and I won't talk you through the programme, but the days have a pattern to them. One of the most important times is in the first day, where the opening session is in the evening, and followed by mini-orals, rapid orals, and poster viewing. And I think those of you that are involved on the Sunday evening, we need to be up to speed so that the Congress kicks off with in a positive way.
As Alan's mentioned to you, there are sort of slightly different types of presentation. We'll talk about the plenary, the state of the art, and the controversies in a minute or two. But so we have full orals, which is the traditional oral presentation that you'll all be used to. We then have clinical cases, and we'll highlight what special needs we have for the chairs of the clinical cases. And then, as Alan has mentioned, the posters have been broken up to encourage lots of interaction between those who present and those who are listening to the presentation. And they have been broken up into mini-orals, and then next level down, rapid orals, and next level down, classic posters.
And we move on to the venue. The venue is the Scottish Exhibition and Congress Centre in Glasgow. It's large without being too large, and the staff there have been particularly helpful in trying to embrace our innovations for this meeting. Your role as a chairperson is primarily to keep the presenters on time. It's particularly important in this Congress that things are kept to time, because some of the sessions will be streamed live, some will be podcast, and although it's a large venue, it's not a particularly large venue, rather, there's still some time required to move between venues if people are trying to chop and change between sessions. We'd advise you to be in the presentation area 10 minutes before your session begins. We'd like you to engage actively with the speakers before the session and to remind them of the importance of timekeeping. And we'd like you to be familiar with whatever timekeeping device is present in the individual venue. And finally, each of the venues will have an audiovisual specialist, a projectionist, in case there are any technical difficulties.
Okay, so on to the style of the thing. That this is across the board as chairman, whether it's a plenary session or whether it's a mini oral session or a rapid oral. Introductions are really part of the impact. Alan knows that one of my pet hates is when chairmen introduce in a very boring manner the whole title, all of the speakers, and half the delegates are asleep by the time the presenter even gets a chance to say a word. So please don't do that. Please think about the session. Give it a bit of time beforehand, and look to say, the next presentation will be from Heidelberg. Dr. Henry is going to give that. It's all about liver transplantation and ischemic reperfusion injury. Really looking forward to that. a little bit of the dynamism, a bit of enthusiasm, and that really does make the difference. So please think about the introduction rather than just reading something out. Similarly, in the next slide, we talk about after the presentation has been given. Now, obviously, if somebody has gone over their time, as we've said, time is so important that unfortunately they have run out of time for questions. So questions only within the allotted time, but we would hope that you would have prepared a couple of questions for each and every speaker in your session and be prepared to try and stimulate discussion from the audience, between the speaker and the audience. We'd really be very keen if you could try to do that, but please, we both love this phrase, rambling grandstanders. It really does describe nicely the person who gets up and tells us about his or her life's work and research and doesn't really ask a question. There's nothing to stop you saying, I'm sorry, is there a question there? Please be aware of the time. Try to move people along. So it really does require energy and dynamism to try to stimulate discussion properly. And that leads us on to this next bit. That's why conferences happen. That's why we enjoy conferences, to get the meaningful conversation and sharing of work. And of course, that applies to any international congress. But for us in ESOT Glasgow, what we've tried to do is to add more technology. So you'll see here the smartphone. There will be the ability, when you're in the Wi-Fi area, to use a specially designed app, which will look at both what your possibilities on the timetable are, but also you'll see this Leebug, and a possibility to have social interaction with other professionals in this area and to discuss presentations that have been made. So there's also an ESOT community on the website. So using the hyperlinks that you see here, we can encourage participants to discuss the content and knowledge. So we have tried to use the modern technology to facilitate this aspect of the conference.
So if we move on to the individual sessions and start with the plenary state-of-the-art and controversies, there are relatively few of these, and if you're chairman of one of these, you'll probably be familiar with chairing at an international meeting, and it's not our intention to dictate to you what you should do. However, the controversies are a novel type of presentation, and we'd like you to be prepared to promote discussion and to try and engage the audience in discussion about the controversial issues that are the focus of these sessions. We move on to the standard oral presentation now.
So, as I mentioned earlier on, the full oral presentation, as we've termed it, is the traditional presentation that you'll all be aware of. So you've seen lots of these types of presentations before. But maybe something slightly different here. First of all, we're going to send the abstracts to you ahead of time so that you will have these and they will be available in plenty of time for you to look at the way the abstract session has been set up and to think about questions. It probably is worthwhile congratulating the presenter because despite the fact that the abstract is being judged by able individuals across Europe, these abstracts have been chosen as the last few hundred within thousands of abstracts that have been submitted for full oral presentation. And as you see, they get the chance to give a 7-minute presentation followed by 3 minutes of discussion. These abstracts, like all the other abstracts, will be available in the eye area, electronically available, and also by USB card. So it is a sort of presentation style that you're used to, but perhaps with some minor differences.
Yeah, and I think just to reinforce what John said about not reading out the presenter's CV, but using the knowledge you have of having seen the abstracts in advance to place the individual presentations in perspective and to give the session a shape. So we move on to the other to the clinical cases. This is an innovation of this ESOT Congress, and the idea is to give individuals the opportunity to present a case which may be not fully worked out, and to engage the audience in giving their opinion about the case material. So the idea is not to impose your view of the diagnosis, but to try and engage the audience in participation in working out or solving the problem or suggesting investigations, for example.
And these clinical cases, these sessions are going to be held within these mini auditoria that Alan referred to earlier on. So an auditoria for about 50 people. They are in the exhibition area. So again, it's just trying to encourage that interaction that can occur, because large auditoria tend to stifle interaction and questions. But these mini auditoria are an attempt to see whether or not this will work better. And the clinical cases will be held in these. Likewise, the next form of presentation, the mini orals, will also be held in those, and in these mini auditoria. So the mini oral sessions are, if you like, the top end of what used to be the posters, and the idea is that they will be held within these theatres, encourage discussion. You'll see there's only 3 minutes for discussion, and then it's only
3 minutes for presentation,
and 2 for discussion. So 5 minutes in total. So a really short presentation, but the idea is to encourage people to have discussion after the session, and perhaps to use the interactive media that we've also mentioned. So hopefully it gives the poster, as was, much more exposure to delegates, and hopefully that will be popular.
And there are other types of sessions that would have been part perhaps of the poster presentations in the past are rapid oral sessions, and these will be presented on large screen monitors at the end of the aisles where the posters are presented. And again, these are short, 3 minutes plus 1 minute for discussion. Very important that you keep the presenters to time and that you try and engage the audience in the discussion about these posters presented as rapid orals. The remaining posters will be presented, as posters always have, on poster board. This isn't a sign of inferiority. We've really selected what would have been posters and selected them for presentation in the way we think will give them maximum exposure. One other thing that's new in this Congress is that the posters will be printed on site, and so the missing poster won't be present at this meeting.
Yeah. And hopefully that will standardise the presentation to some extent. So in our penultimate slide, really just to say, look, we know that we've given quite a lot of information in the last few minutes. Thank you very much for listening to all of that. We won't ask you to go through it again if you've forgotten any bits or want to run over again. There is a letter attached to this presentation which perhaps summarises some of the important points. And just to say thank you once again for agreeing to be a chair, and thank you for listening to this videocast. And in our last slide, really just to say we look forward to seeing you in Glasgow.
We look forward to seeing you in Glasgow, and we'd like you to help us to make this a memorable Congress. Thank you.
Thanks very much.